Hey guys, tonight we slip into the sandals, or sometimes ratty old boots, of a medieval assassin. Not the sleek parkour jumping kind you're picturing from modern games. No, tonight it's cramped corridors, creaky doors, and a dagger you hope won't slip from your sweaty grip. Imagine crouching in a hayloft, cold straw, poking your legs, waiting for a duke who's already 3 hours late to his own demise. There's no dramatic music, just your breath and a suspiciously loud goat in the courtyard. You're not some mysterious figure in black leather. You're probably wearing wool. It itches. The torchlight flickers on the walls and your hands shake from the cold. Or is it nerves? And before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and what time it is where you're listening, because nothing says medieval murder like a global bedtime roll call. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in silence. Not dramatic silence, just the sort where you're trying not to alert a sleeping dog that guards the side door of some third-rate noble's estate. You've been hired to kill someone important, at least important enough to have a dog. You've got a crude dagger, a vague floor plan scrawled onto sheet parchment, and a name you can barely pronounce. You mouth it silently as you sneak closer, just to make sure you don't kill the wrong guy. Again. Let's be honest. Medieval assassins weren't professionals. There were no guilds, no certifications, and definitely no practice targets. You just got angry, got desperate, or got bribed, and you usually got caught. Historians still argue whether assassin was even a real profession, or more of a medieval insult hurled at anyone who killed without official paperwork. But for the sake of tonight, let's pretend you're legit. You were paid a few silver pennies by a man in a tavern with bad teeth and worse motives. You're not sure if he'll pay the rest. You're not sure if you'll live long enough to collect. The idea of the shadowy killer leaping from rooftop to rooftop in absolute silence is fantasy. Most rooftops were made of thatch. They squeaked. They crumbled. One assassin in 1293 fell through the roof before he even reached the target, landing on a table mid-feast. They didn't execute him. They just laughed through turnips and let the guards beat him with a spoon. You're not here for that fate. You've rehearsed every step. You count your paces. Softly, 1, 2, 3, pause. Listen for footsteps. 4, 5, curse a chicken. Always a chicken. The truth is, stealth wasn't just hard, it was impossible. Wooden floors moaned. Doors had iron hinges that screamed when opened. Even your clothes betrayed you. Wool swished, leather creaked, and let's not forget your greatest enemy, gravel. Yes, gravel. A courtyard scattered with it to make any footfall sound like someone stomping a bag of forks. But it's not just the sound that gets you. It's the darkness. You're probably thinking darkness is good. It isn't. Medieval nights weren't moody blue with soft shadows like in the movies. They were pitch black. Fall into a well and die black. Without a torch, you couldn't see your own hand. With a torch, everyone else could see you. So you light no torch. You inch forward by feel. Your heart is hammering loud enough to alert the stables. You think you hear something, a whisper, a footstep. No, it's just your imagination or the goat again. You whisper a curse. The goat replies. Fact. There was a documented case in 1380 where an entire assassination was foiled because a goat bleated at the exact wrong time. The assassin was caught, and the goat became a local legend. They named him Sir Gregory. You finally reach the outer wall. It's lower than expected, but still a climb. The stones are rough, damp, and mossy. You're grateful for that one guy who told you to rub ash on your hands. It gives grip. Or maybe it was poison. You forgot to ask. At the top, you lie flat, breathing shallow. You made it over the first wall. Now comes the worst part, waiting. Assassins didn't rush. You couldn't. You often had to spend hours or even days inside castles, cloisters, or hovels just waiting for the target to appear. One man reportedly waited inside a privy shaft. He didn't get the kill. He did get dysentery. You settle into the shadows. It's cold. The stone beneath you seems to suck the heat from your bones. You shift to stay warm. Bad idea. A tile loosens and falls. You freeze. Somewhere below, a dog barks. You wait for shouting. None comes. You exhale slowly. Maybe tonight's your night. Maybe you'll pull this off. Maybe you'll be the one name in the records who succeeded without a torch, without help, without goats or gravel. But then again, probably not. You wouldn't expect to fear a friar in a patchy robe. But medieval assassins often looked nothing like your mental image. They weren't shrouded in mystery cloaks with glowing red eyes. They looked like normal people because they were normal people. Most didn't train with swords in remote mountaintop temples. They plowed fields, baked bread, or spent most of their lives in church pews. And that's exactly what made them effective, at least in theory. Who would suspect the slightly overweight man selling fish to also be carrying a small blade in his boot? Or the widow delivering herbal remedies to a nobleman's chamber to have slipped something extra into his tea? You huddle closer against the stone wall, trying to still your breath. You think about the people who came before you, those who looked harmless and struck hard, but also those who botched the job so completely that they became cautionary tales. Take, for example, Brother Adamar, a 14th century monk with too much zeal and not enough sense. According to scattered chronicles, he attempted to poison an abbot he deemed corrupt. The problem? He accidentally mixed the deadly herbs into the communion wine. The entire monastery got ill. The abbot survived. Adamar, unfortunately, did not. Historians still argue whether Brother Adamar was acting alone or on behalf of a larger movement. Either way, he ended up both martyred and mocked. Hard to pull off both in the same lifetime. And then there was Marjorie Taylor, a laundress in York, who got close to a tax collector under the guise of romance. Her plan: slit his throat while he slept. Her flaw: falling asleep first. The man awoke, panicked, and believing a demon was attacking him, smashed her with a chamber pot. No one said this job was elegant. You, however, are different. You've memorized the layout. You know the shift changes. You even timed your infiltration with a nearby saint's feast when half the guards are likely too drunk to stand. Still, you hesitate. The night air smells of wet wood and sheep manure. A bat flits silently overhead. You flinch. Bats have no business being that quiet. In this world, silence is both ally and enemy. It hides you. It also isolates you, traps you in your own heartbeat, your own paranoid mind. Every shadow could be someone watching. Every breeze could be a whisper of betrayal. Because here's another surprise: most assassins were betrayed. Seriously. The odds were never in your favor. Someone talked. Someone bragged. Someone got cold feet and spilled everything to a priest in a confessional booth that frankly wasn't as private as you'd hoped. You make your way through the garden now, skirting the edge of an overgrown hedge. Medieval estates were often built with no thought to symmetry or subtlety. Thorny bushes, crumbling statues, wells. No one had covered. It's a miracle anyone survived childhood, let alone a murder attempt. One quirky tidbit you've picked up in certain parts of Germany: some assassins believed that placing a sprig of wolfsbane in your shoe would help you walk soundlessly. It didn't. It just made your foot itch and possibly gave you a rash. You didn't try that. You stuck with ash dust and crossed fingers. You reach the window. It's ajar, just as you hoped. You listen. A snore. A deep one, rhythmic. Your mark is sleeping. You slip inside. The room smells of tallow candles and stale breath. A fire is dying in the corner, the embers casting weak orange glows. Your eyes adjust. You spot the bed. You pause. This is the hardest part. Movies and novels glamorize this moment. But reality, you're nervous, you're shaking. There's a person in that bed. Someone with bad habits and weird dreams, and maybe even a pet goose who's going to outlive them. And here you are trying to decide which side of the neck is easier. In many cases, assassins abandoned the plan right here. They couldn't do it. One man in 1411 actually crawled into bed with his target out of panic. They both screamed. They both fled. And to this day, no one knows who he was. You don't scream. You inch closer. The floor creaks. You freeze. The snoring continues. You reach into your belt, wrap your fingers around the hilt. It's not fancy. The blade is dull. You had to sharpen it on a rock outside the city gate. It's possibly older than you. And then a cough from the bed. The snoring stops. Time stops. The figure shifts, turns, mumbles something about pickled onions. You inch backward, quietly. You're not ready. Not tonight. This is the real history no one tells. Assassins were human. They panicked. They hesitated. They forgot which pouch held the poison. They killed the wrong man. They missed. They ran. And yet you're still here. You backtrack. You through the window, cross the hedge, past Sir Gregory, the goat still watching you suspiciously, over the gravel, and back into the night. Tomorrow you'll try again. Or maybe you won't. Maybe you'll go back to baking bread, selling fish, delivering laundry. Safer, warmer, and considerably less goat-filled. Section 3. You're sore the next morning, not from battle, but from crouching too long behind a rain barrel and trying to breathe as quietly as possible next to a snoring goose. That's the truth of medieval assassination. It's not glamorous. It's damp, cramped, and usually unsuccessful, especially when the target is someone with actual power. Killing a king, forget it. You hear the phrase regicide and imagine something bold, a dramatic knight, a hidden blade, a throne suddenly empty. But history is messier. Almost no assassins ever got close to royalty. And those who did, well, they didn't last long enough to brag. The problem wasn't just the guards, it was the castles. Thick walls, narrow staircases, gatehouses with murder holes that rained stones and boiling oil. Oh, and kings slept in the middle of massive halls surrounded by loyal retainers who were mostly sober. Mostly. So, how do you kill a king? Poorly is the answer. Consider the infamous attempt on King Edward II. His reign was unpopular and conspiracies bubbled up like a bad stew, but getting to him, he was surrounded constantly. The closest anyone came was during a chaotic rebellion, when allegedly an assassin got within arm's reach but sneezed at the wrong moment. He was impaled by a guard, wielding a fireplace poker. Not an epic death, just very sharp. Historians still argue whether that incident even happened, or if it was an embellishment meant to mock how close and yet how hilariously far these plotters always were. Even when royals did get killed, it wasn't always by strangers. Most kings were poisoned or stabbed by their own relatives. You don't have that kind of access or that kind of family drama. You're more likely to be sent after a minor baron or a city official, someone powerful enough to earn enemies, but not quite powerful enough to afford competent bodyguards, like Sir Aldred of Glemford, who famously kept only one guard. And that guard was blind, and also a taxidermist on the side. Killing a nobleman like Aldred sounds easier, and yet even those jobs were disasters in waiting. One man, a discontented stable boy, tried to stab his master during a hunting trip. But he forgot two things. One, how loud chainmail is when you're hiding in a bush, and two, how fast a horse can run when startled. The horse kicked him unconscious before anyone else got involved. You're smarter than that. You've started studying your targets for days, watching their routines, counting the steps they take from their hall to the garden, noting where they eat, where they pray, even how long they linger at the outhouse. Because sometimes that's the best opportunity. One quirky method. A would-be assassin in the early 1300s tried luring his target into an abandoned mill with the promise of secret relics. The relics, chicken bones, dressed in gold foil. It almost worked. Almost. The target got suspicious when the angelic voices were clearly two drunk guys hiding behind a curtain making falsetto noises. But despite the failure rate, the desire to kill high-ranking people persisted. Sometimes it wasn't about politics or money. It was desperation. A peasant whose land was stolen. A soldier denied payment. A lover scorned. Or simply someone who believed truly that God had told them to act. A few assassins were pilgrims, people already traveling across the land using their holy purpose as the perfect cover. Imagine it. You walk barefoot for weeks, clutching a rosary. You stop at every shrine. You mutter Latin prayers. No one suspects a thing. But in your shoe, a sharpened needle. In your cloak, a vial of poison, disguised as holy oil. It's poetic. It's clever. It also rarely worked. The reality was most poisons of the time were more likely to induce vomiting than death. Hemlock. Sure, if you used enough. Nightshade deadly, but easy to detect. One botched attempt in Venice involved overdosing a duke's wine with moldy mushroom juice. He survived, his cook did not. That's another lesson you're learning. The wrong person often pays. You start to question your motives. You think about the cook, the stable boy, the poor blind taxidermist. And now you think about tonight, because tonight you'll try again. A different target, perhaps. Someone less guarded. A bailiff known for cruelty. He walks alone every evening after market. You plan to intercept him near the orchard. You'll hide in a crumbling wall, crouched quiet, waiting. You've practiced the strike. One quick motion. In and out. No speech, no drama. Just action. But part of you knows it won't go like that. Because the history of medieval assassins isn't a tale of swift vengeance. It's a story of fumbled blades, of wrong turns, of realizing too late that your cloak got caught on a nail. It's the story of hesitation. And that's why it's so hard. Not because people were stronger back then, but because everything from the shoes you wore to the doors you opened conspired against you. Cities weren't made for secrets. Castles weren't made for stealth. And humans were not made for killing. Not like this. Not in the night, not alone. So you rise, stretch the stiffness from your legs, gather your tools, check your pouch 3 times just in case. And once more you vanish into the dark, hoping tonight you'll be the exception. You've heard the phrase, the city never sleeps. But medieval cities didn't just sleep, they snored. Loudly. Obnoxiously. Every door, floorboard, gate, cart, dog, and step betrayed you. If you're wondering why medieval assassins failed so often, it wasn't always nerves. It was acoustics. Tonight your target lives inside a bustling town. Narrow lanes, tall timber-framed houses, and livestock, wandering like they pay rent. You're aiming for subtlety. The city is not. You begin your approach well after dark. Theoretically, it's safer then. But night in a medieval town was a very different beast. There are no street lamps. Just the rare flicker of a lantern. And even those are behind shutters or clutched by patrolling watchmen with very itchy trigger clubs. You step into a side street. Immediately you're greeted by your oldest enemy, geese. Not dogs, not guards, geese. Loud, mean, territorial. Someone keeps them as security, and it's not a joke. One French town trained a whole flock to honk when strangers got too close. That little detail led to 2 failed murder attempts and 1 chaotic bakery fire. Historians still argue whether geese should be credited with saving more nobles than the guards ever did. You try to skirt around them, hugging the edge of a foul-smelling tannery. Your boots squelch in something best left undefined. You're praying to every saint you've ever heard of that you don't slip. Because here's the thing, cities were sensory minefields. Cobblestones were uneven. Water channels ran openly down the middle of streets carrying waste and the occasional rat. Doors had huge iron hinges that wailed like dying cows when opened. And don't even think about climbing anything. Roof tiles slid, gutters broke, pigeons panicked. Everything made noise. The trick, they say, is blending in. Walk like a drunkard, stumble like a poet, slouch like a tired merchant. But that only works during the day. At night, anyone on the street is assumed to be either a thief, a lunatic, or someone worth clubbing just in case. You're none of those, but try explaining that to the night watch. You pass a shuttered tavern. Inside, someone's snoring in harmony with the creaking sign above the door. You pause under an overhang, shadowed for now. Your target's home is 3 doors down. A crooked timber house with ivy strangling the front. You know the layout. Small courtyard. Latch that sticks. A bedroom window just low enough to reach. If you climb the barrel, someone thoughtfully left outside. But first you wait. Assassins waited. For hours. Days. Hidden in haylofts behind statues or famously in cesspits. One recorded killer sat inside a collapsed bread oven for 2 nights, surviving on hard cheese and regret. His target skipped town. He got pneumonia. You lean against the wall, shifting your weight gently. The night is colder than it looks. You forgot gloves. Your fingers sting. Your nose won't stop running. Somewhere a cat screeches, and then silence returns. You remember an old tale about a would-be assassin in Florence who got locked inside a room he'd snuck into. He waited 3 days. On the 4th, he started singing to stay sane. A maid discovered him because she liked the tune. That's the thing, medieval cities worked against stealth. Noise carried, shadows tricked. The very fabric of the city was built to expose you. Quirky fact. Some wealthier towns had curfew bells to tell people when to put out their fires and go to bed. Once those bells rang, it was considered suspicious to be out. You've heard stories of people beaten simply for walking without a lantern. It's ironic, if you'd carried a light, you'd be seen. If you didn't, you'd be questioned. You peer around the edge of a cart. The lane is clear. You dart across. The barrel is where it should be. Thank heaven for lazy servants and beer deliveries. You climb slowly, silently. The wood groans under your weight. You wince. No movement inside the window. You're lucky. You ease the window open. It resists. You whisper encouragement. A gentle tug. It gives. Inside, it's warm, quiet. The smell of rosemary and old wool. Someone snoring. Steady. You're in. You pause to let your eyes adjust. There's a candle stub on the table, its wax long cooled. The room is modest, pewter bowl, wooden chest. A poorly mended tapestry hanging crooked. You don't care. You're focused on the lump beneath the blanket. This is the hard part again. Not the killing, the not killing. Because your target looks normal. His breath whistles. He mutters something about apples. There's a small wooden toy on the floor, probably his kid's. You weren't told about a kid. You freeze. Reassess. Historians still debate whether assassins hesitated for moral reasons or practical ones. Is it harder to kill someone when they feel real? Does empathy sneak in when a man talks in his sleep about food and family? You back up. You don't have to do this tonight. You could come back. Maybe when you're sure he's alone. Maybe when the city doesn't feel like it's actively working to humiliate you. You slip back through the window. The street is darker now. Clouds hide the moon. You almost miss the step down from the barrel and land harder than intended. A dog barks. Run or stay still. You freeze. Again. The barking stops. This is your life now. Not as a legendary blade in the night, but as someone who sweats through his tunic, argues with poultry, and debates ethical assassination through clenched teeth. You breathe. One more night survived. One more failure not discovered. Maybe tomorrow the city will be quieter. Or maybe tomorrow you'll try the countryside. Your boots are still damp from last night, and so are your spirits. You're starting to suspect the universe, or at least medieval architecture, has a personal grudge against you. Every night ends the same way, with you sneaking home empty-handed, smelling like mildew and disappointment. You've tried stealth, you've tried timing, but tonight you try tools, specifically weapons. You open your ragged satchel and inspect the sorry arsenal you've cobbled together. A rusty dagger, a small hammer, a tiny vial of something someone swore was poison, but smells suspiciously like elderberry syrup. If you're lucky, the dagger won't snap on impact, the hammer won't bounce, and the syrup won't give someone an energizing sugar high instead of cardiac failure. Weapons in medieval assassination were often as unreliable as the assassins themselves. The idea of an elegant kill fantasy. Blades were dull, poisons were inconsistent, and ranged weapons, like crossbows, great in open fields. Less great when you're crouched under a staircase behind a drunk guard and trying not to sneeze. Let's talk about the short sword. Compact, quick, concealable, except not really. In a world where belts did double duty as suspenders and pockets didn't exist, hiding a blade was harder than you think. One assassin reportedly tried to tie a dagger to his thigh using sheep gut. The gut stretched. The dagger slid down his leg mid-stride and clattered across the cobblestones like a bell announcing his doom. Historians still argue whether that story was a moral parable or just an embarrassing moment someone refused to let die quietly. You shift your focus to poison, romanticized in stories, glorified by scribes, and in real life mostly guesswork. Some favored belladonna deadly, in the right dose deadly to the wrong person if you blinked. Others used arsenic, though it wasn't as reliable back then. One quirky tidbit: in 1387, a man allegedly attempted to poison a rival by soaking his cloak in a toxic brew. Unfortunately, it rained. The poison washed out. The rival stayed healthy. The assassin caught pneumonia and died of embarrassment. You once met a traveling apothecary who claimed the best tool was a simple needle dipped in monk's hood, just a prick to the neck, and good night. You tried it on a rat. The rat got cranky but didn't die. Then it bit you. Now you're mildly afraid of rats. So tonight you bring the dagger and the hammer. Not because they'll work, but because carrying something feels better than carrying nothing. You leave the syrup behind. It's better on pancakes. Your target tonight is a minor clerk in the bishop's court, allegedly corrupt, definitely pompous, and recently responsible for evicting a widow who owed 2 chickens in back rent. The man has enemies. You're just the one they could afford. You make your way through a quiet back lane, avoiding the main cathedral road, where night watchmen patrol with lanterns and an overinflated sense of justice. You duck through a side garden, brushing past hedges that smell of damp time and bad decisions. You reach the side door of the clerk's home. It's locked. Of course it is. You pull out a thin iron pin, hoping to pick the lock. You're not trained in this. You learned from a guy in the market who once picked his own teeth with a fishbone. Still, you wiggle the pin inside the keyhole and hope for the best. Click. Wait. Was that it? The door creaks open. Victory. And then the hinges scream like you've kicked a pig. You freeze. Silence. Then a cough upstairs. Footsteps. No turning back now. You creep inside. This is where you wish your dagger gleamed or your hammer sang a low hum of vengeance. But instead your dagger is smudged, your hammer wrapped in a cloth to keep it from clinking. You look more like a confused carpenter than a killer. The clerk is asleep in a side room, the door cracked just enough for candlelight to spill out. You edge closer. You pause. There's movement. A small figure near the bed. A servant. A child. You lean to see it's a cat. The cat sees you. The cat knows. You whisper, "Please don't." It knocks a cup off the table. The crash is volcanic. You hear a shout. Sheets rustle. A groggy voice curses in Latin. You turn and run again. Back into the night-down alleys, past a startled monk who screams and drops a basket of bread. You're not even subtle anymore. You run like someone with an overdue library fine and a torch-wielding mob on your heels. You dive behind a woodpile, heart pounding. Your dagger is gone. The hammer, still with you? Comforting, but useless. This is your life now, misfires, meows, and nearly maiming a man with a hammer that wouldn't break a melon. You've started to wonder if it's even worth it. The money's bad. The risks are high. The tools are awful. One historian quipped that medieval assassination was a practice perfected in fiction and fouled in fact. He wasn't wrong. You lay back watching clouds pass over the moon. Somewhere a rooster crows far too early. You think maybe next time just bring a rock. At least rocks don't squeak, spill, or require training. You're not proud of your job interview, if you can call it that. There was no secret knock, no candlelit tavern booth, no cloaked figure whispering riddles. Just a man named Tomas, with 3 teeth and a grudge against his landlord. He slid into the seat next to you. At the tavern smelled strongly of turnips and muttered, "You look desperate. You want coin? That was your recruitment? The truth is, getting into the world of medieval assassination wasn't glamorous. There were no shadowy guilds handing out contracts on vellum scrolls with crimson wax seals. Most of the time, you were just the nearest available angry person. Historians still argue whether organized assassination rings even existed in most of Europe, while Eastern groups like the infamous Nizari Hashashin were legendary. We'll get to them. Your average Western assassin was more freelance than franchise. You didn't get hired for skill. You got hired for access. You worked in the kitchen. You were a scribe. You knew someone who knew someone. In most cases, you didn't even want the job. You were guilted into it, tricked into it, or just owed someone a favor. Your own employer gave you half a coin up front and promised more once the deed was done. He said, "You'll be like a ghost." You weren't. You knocked over a milk jug trying to sneak through a barn last week. The cow screamed. You screamed. Everyone lost. Still, it could be worse. Consider Willem of Bruges, a baker who was offered gold to deal with a merchant. He agreed, baked a poisoned pie, and delivered it personally. Only the merchant was allergic to almonds and tasted them instantly. He lived. Willem did not. The town laughed for months. They called it the tart that fought back. Quirky failures like this were more common than success stories. No training, no equipment, no plan beyond hope he's asleep and I'm brave. You tried asking Tomas for advice. He said, "Don't get caught," and bought another turnip. You've since learned that most advice in this line of work is either wildly impractical or incredibly vague. Move like fog. Kill like fire. Okay, sure. But which end of the dagger goes where one man, desperate for mentorship, reportedly paid a traveling mercenary 3 silver to teach him the art of silent death? The mercenary took the coin and taught him how to hold his breath under a blanket. He died trying it in a hayloft. The blanket caught fire. You've begun practicing on your own. Not killing, just sneaking. Moving from door to door without creaking, stepping over loose cobbles. Breathing through your nose so you don't wheeze like a haunted accordion. It's progress, but no one's paying you for that. Which brings us to money. The pay is bad. So bad. No assassin is rolling in gold. You get scraps. A few coins. Maybe a stolen ring if your employer's feeling generous. You tried haggling once. The man laughed, then offered you half a loaf of bread and a chicken. You declined. In hindsight, the chicken might have been a good deal. The real assassins, the professional ones, worked for nobles. High stakes, big payouts, political consequences, but you're at the bottom. Hired to scare, not to kill. To send a message. Not that anyone reads the message when it's carved badly into a fence with a rusty blade. One open question among scholars is whether many of these so-called assassins even intended to succeed. Some suggest they were never meant to complete the task, just stir fear, unsettle a target, or make noise in the local rumor mill. A blade in the dark, even if it misses, still makes a statement. You're starting to wonder if that's your role. A statement. A warning. A lesson to lock your windows and bribe your guards. You sit by the riverbank, now sharpening your blade with a rock that's far too smooth for the job. Sparks don't fly. The metal doesn't sing. You're not a hero in a bard's tale. You're a tired person, trying to make steel less dull than your career prospects. A man walks past. He glances at your knife, then at your face, then keeps walking a little faster. Not because you look dangerous, because you look like someone with bad ideas and nothing left to lose. You think about quitting. Again. But you remember the coin just enough for bread and a bed. You think about the widow the clerk evicted. You think about the cook who looked scared when you passed him last night. You think about the people who hired you, the ones who do sleep at night. Maybe you're not a real assassin, but maybe, just maybe, tonight's the night you do something right. Or maybe you'll just knock over another goat cart. Either way you stand. Slide the dull dagger back into its place, wrap the hammer again, wipe your hands on your tunic, and head into the growing dusk. You're not a professional, but you're still here. You count your coins for the third time. Still 7. Not the shiny kind, these are scuffed, bent, and suspiciously sticky. One even has a bite mark that may or may not be yours. You've been paid a pittance for a job that might cost your life. That's how it always is. The promise is always the same: get rich, retire early. But most assassins didn't live long enough to retire. They didn't even live long enough to spend the first payment. Or if they did, it went to someone else. Usually the person who betrayed them. You shift uneasily, remembering the last meeting with your employer. He smiled too much. Told you the job was simple, said the guards were drunk, said the target had it coming. Then he vanished, faster than your confidence. Assassination in the Middle Ages wasn't just dangerous, it was downright unrewarding. If you succeeded, you were a liability. If you failed, you were a headline. Well, not a headline exactly. More like a half-whispered tavern tale, embellished with each retelling until you became a pantomime villain or a tragic fool, usually both. Even successful assassins were rarely celebrated. You'd think people would throw coins at your feet, hail you as a liberator, lift you on their shoulders through the village square. Nope. They locked their doors, avoided your gaze, and quietly made plans to report you to the nearest priest. One of the few recorded assassins to actually profit from the job was a man named Alwyn the Lime Burner. He killed a corrupt magistrate in a northern English shire and was rewarded with a small pig. Not metaphorically, a real pig. He tried to name it Justice. It ran away. Historians still argue whether Alwyn meant to kill the magistrate or if it was just a badly timed push during a bar fight. Either way, he bragged about it for years and eventually got arrested for public drunkenness and boasting of murder. The pig was never seen again. You shift your weight, hiding in the shadows of a crumbling stable. Your target tonight is a grain tax collector. Unpopular, sure, but well-connected. Too well-connected. Rumor is he has a deal with the guard captain. That makes things riskier. That also explains the slightly larger fee, 8 coins this time. Of course, you've only been paid 3 in advance. The rest comes after. If you live. If you're not caught. If the employer doesn't suddenly remember that you technically never finished the job because the man took 2 days to die. That happened to someone you met in the market. An assassin named Isolde who poisoned a baron's stew with crushed glasswort and thistleroot. The baron lingered vomiting into his fur-lined chamber pot for 2 days. When he finally passed, the employer decided the slow death wasn't dramatic enough and refused to pay. Isolde retaliated by painting threats on his door with goat's blood. Very effective. Very illegal. You remember Isolde as the only assassin you ever met who seemed halfway professional. She carried herself with a kind of broken pride, like a gladiator who fought only because she'd forgotten how to do anything else. She told you once it's not the killing that eats you, it's the waiting and the lies. You hear that now? As you crouch by the wall waiting, always waiting. Tonight is supposed to be simple. The tax collector walks from the hall to the counting house at dusk. The path is narrow. You'll be hiding behind a wagon. Just one good moment. That's all it takes. Or so they say. In reality, even the simplest hits are disasters in waiting. Dogs appear, friends tag along, someone stops to tie their shoe, or worse, your employer tips them off. That's the true danger of this profession. Not the guards, not even the victims, but your own employer. Betrayal is common. Most medieval assassins were expendable tools. They were hired for deniability. Once the job was done or botched, they became inconvenient. A few coins poorer and one loose end richer. In Bruges, there's a tale of a hired killer who succeeded in strangling a merchant during a night sermon. The employer celebrated, then promptly turned him in as a foreign agent. The assassin was hanged the next day. The employer promoted to town magistrate. Historians still debate whether that story is folklore or just depressingly believable. You've started developing a system. No names, no written notes, no meetups in the same place twice. You carry nothing that ties you to anyone. Not even the coins, those get spent as quickly as they come, usually on bad stew and sleeping pallets that smell like regret. You hear footsteps. 2 sets, your heart sinks. The tax collector brought a friend. You peer around the wagon. He's laughing, holding a pipe. The friend is young, armed. You won't strike tonight. You don't kill witnesses. Not because of mercy, because of math. 2 targets mean double the noise, double the chase, and half the chance you'll make it out alive. You're not suicidal. Not yet. You retreat, melt into the side alley, and fade into the press of the evening crowd. As you walk, you wonder if anyone else has noticed how often these easy jobs fall apart. Is it bad luck? Or is someone setting you up to fail? You think of Tomas, of that last smirk, of the half-finished sentence. If you don't make it well, and then a shrug, you'll find out soon enough. One more night, one more failure, but you're still breathing. And that in this line of work is the closest thing to success. You're starting to notice a pattern. Every time a job seems too quiet, too easy, too neatly timed, something holy gets involved. Tonight it's the church. The target, a high-ranking clergyman with suspiciously lavish robes and a personal wine cellar that rivals half the town's. You'd think being clergy might earn him a pass, but no. He's accused of selling indulgences for triple the rate, blackmailing widows, and allegedly cursing a man's livestock for underpaying tithes. You were told he needs reminding he's mortal. Unfortunately, the church is also the worst possible place to sneak around in. Medieval churches weren't cozy sanctuaries. They were massive echo chambers of stone and candlelight. Every step reverberates. Every whisper bounces. It's like trying to sneak through a marble drum. You've hidden inside before once in a cathedral alcove, behind a stack of hymnals, which were surprisingly flammable. You didn't start the fire. The candle did. Still, people remembered the smoke and your suspiciously soot-covered tunic. That's when you learned rule number one churches always notice. Tonight's attempt is more modest. A small priory, fewer monks, more shadows. It's just after Vespers. Most of the brothers are in their dormitories, a few still loiter in the cloister, murmuring prayers and occasionally arguing over who borrowed whose psalter. You slink past the herb garden, slipping behind a weathered statue of St. Cuthbert. His nose is chipped. You whisper an apology anyway. The clergyman sleeps in a modest chamber near the apse. Modest, of course, being a relative term, his bed has cushions. You've seen nobles sleep on straw. You're just about to creep toward the door when something shifts behind you. A bell jingles. You freeze. Out of the shadows lumbers a large shape, bird purring, judging. A monastery cat. These beasts live forever, attend every sermon, and have zero respect for the art of assassination. This one is orange. Enormous. It weaves through your legs and lets out a questioning, "Please not now." It meows louder. Then it sits. The clergyman's door opens. Your heart explodes in your chest. You drop flat behind a nearby bench, knocking your shin painfully against a bucket of incense ash. A coughing fit seizes you, but you hold it in, eyes watering. The clergyman peers out. He sees the cat. "Oh, there you are, Brother Thistle," he murmurs. "You cheeky little thing." He bends down, picks up the massive feline, and retreats into his room. Door closes. You exhale through your nose like a deflating wineskin. Historians still argue whether cats were trained informants for clergy or simply nuisances, blessed by divine timing. You wait another 10 minutes, then 20. The bells chime again, midnight. You consider trying again, but something feels off. The door, the candles, the cat. You retreat. On your way out, you nearly trip over a monk, kneeling in silent prayer behind a pillar. You both scream. He thinks you're a demon. You think he's a hallucination. You knock over a basin. He throws holy water at you. You run soaking and sneezing into the night. You'd laugh if it weren't so common. Many medieval assassination attempts failed not because of guards or morals, but because the target was on consecrated ground. Killing in a church wasn't just illegal, it was theologically complicated. Even if you succeeded, you'd likely be excommunicated, cursed, or forced into humiliating penance, like walking barefoot across town dressed in sackcloth and ash. And if you were caught, your trial would be worse than your crime. Clerical courts were unpredictable, sometimes lenient, sometimes brutal. One poor soul who attempted to stab a bishop in 1334 was sentenced to spend the rest of his life ringing the bell tower every morning as penance. He went deaf within a year. The bishop never missed a dawn wake-up again. You wander back to your corner of the city, shivering from the holy water and aching from the bucket brews. You're starting to suspect the real assassin is irony. You think about the rules you've broken. Not just man's laws, but spiritual ones. You weren't raised for this. You weren't taught how to hate. You learned it slowly through debt's loss and the kind of winter that takes everything except your resolve. You crawl into your hidden nook behind the tanner's workshop. It stinks. It's warm. You curl up and try to sleep. But sleep is hard when your last job was thwarted by a sanctified house cat. Maybe you'll try again, maybe not. But tomorrow someone else will say, just one more job. He deserves it. And you'll say nothing. Just listen. Then decide. Because even if the church forgives, the cat never will. You try to keep a low profile, but you've been spotted. Not by a guard, not by a priest, by an old woman selling onions. She squints at you as you slink past her stall, nose wrinkling like she's sniffed out your entire resume. You can almost hear her thoughts. That one's up to something. You want to deny it, but frankly, she's not wrong. In a city this size, it's hard to blend in when you're always looking over your shoulder, asking vague questions, and smelling faintly of hayloft and burnt wax. Your alibis are getting thinner than the soles of your boots. Which brings us to your next challenge. Cover stories. Assassins, real or would-be, needed them constantly. Where were you last night? Who were you with? Why does your sleeve have blood on it and your shoe a human tooth? Your answers have to be instant and believable. But medieval excuses, they were creative. One famous failure happened in Ghent when a man was caught fleeing a crime scene with a dagger in his belt. He claimed he was delivering it to be blessed by a monk. The dagger was still bloody. He was still executed. But some folks found the line so good they started using it to mock any bad lie. Off to bless your dagger, are you? Historians still debate whether that phrase became popular or if it was just a clever invention by a bored scribe. Either way, it's more entertaining than your usual fallback. I was out looking for my cousin's lost goat, which has now been used so many times you're pretty sure the city thinks your cousin has the world's most elusive goat. Tonight's target is a town scribe. He's not a bad man, but he knows something. That's what you were told anyway. A quiet job, supposedly. In and out. No guards, no pets, no choir boys. You arrive just before dusk. His house is near the edge of the city, 2 stories, shuttered windows, and a courtyard garden that smells like lavender and bad secrets. You wait in a niche beside the entrance, listening to the wind shuffle the branches of a pear tree. You're trying to think of your alibi in case someone catches you. Lost goat is out. Maybe wrong address? Or looking for a public privy? It's amazing how much of your life now revolves around pretending to be confused. The scribe's shutters creak open. He leans out, yawns, and empties a chamber pot. You duck just in time. Welcome to medieval espionage. Equal parts danger and dodging excrement. He goes back inside. You move. You scale the garden wall, nearly slip on wet moss, and land in a flower bed. With a grunt you pray sounded more like a fox than a human. No one stirs. You creep across the yard. The back door is bolted, the window's too narrow. You wait. A soft glow flickers behind the curtains. Candlelight. He's writing. You think about the letter he's supposedly drafting, something dangerous, something that could ruin the people who hired you, or so they say. You've learned not to trust motives. Most of the time your employers are worse than the targets. You're not delivering justice, you're settling scores, sometimes petty ones. A rival in love. A feud over inheritance. One job months ago was just about a pig someone wouldn't sell. You peer through a crack. The scribe dips his quill. He's muttering softly, talking to himself like scribes often do. He doesn't look powerful or evil. He just looks tired. Like you. You hesitate. Historians often speculate about the psychological toll of assassins, not that they kept journals. But some anecdotes survive. A Florentine assassin was reported to have confessed in church, just to hear himself say the names aloud. Another in Normandy carved the names of his victims into a wooden plank, then wept and burned it. One fringe scholar believes most failed assassins didn't lack skill. They lacked certainty. Certainty that the job was just. Certainty that the target deserved it. Certainty that someone somewhere would remember them kindly. You don't know if you believe that. But standing in this garden dagger in hand, breathing the cold night air, and watching a man write a letter he may never finish, you do feel something shift. You don't go in. Instead, you back away, climb the wall, slip into the alley, melt into the shadows. You'll make up a reason tomorrow. Something vague. Something that blames the weather. It won't be the first time you lied to your employer. It won't be the last. You walk past the onion woman again. She's still squinting. She lifts a bulb and sniffs. You again, she mutters. You nod. Lost the goat again, she snorts. Third time this week. She gives you an onion for free. You almost smile. You're not sleeping much anymore. It's not the guilt, though, that lingers like a dull ache behind your eyes. It's the waiting. The hours crouched in corners, behind barrels, inside crawl spaces that smell like mold and spider drama, all for nothing, because the mark didn't show, or showed up with company, or you got distracted by a dog, or a cat, or your own thoughts again. Assassins in stories strike fast, but the real kind, they wait. A lot. Tonight your hideout is a narrow crawl space beneath a chapel. You're pressed between two stone foundations lying flat on your back. It's damp. Something drips. You haven't identified it. You're not going to. Your target is a clerk again. This one handles property records for a noble family. He supposedly knows too much. You were given a map with a big X scrawled over his sleeping quarters. The map was wrong. That room was filled with choir boys practicing Salve Regina off-key. You stayed anyway. You figured you'd wait it out. See who left the building alone. Maybe catch a glimpse of your man lighting a candle, sipping wine, picking his teeth. Something human to tell you it's him. That was 3 hours ago. Now your leg's asleep, your dagger's poking your ribs, and your brain is unraveling at the edges. You start naming the stones above your head. That one's Herbert. That one's Maud. That one looks like it might fall on your face. You close your eyes for just a second. A rustle. You snap awake. Someone's walking above you. Soft steps. Not heavy, cloaked. Alone. You tense. But they pass. No door creaks. No voices follow. It's not your target. You sag back, disappointed. Again. This is the side of assassination no one glamorizes the not doing of it. The uncertainty. The almosts. You start to wonder if this is your punishment, not death, not capture, but the slow decay of resolve. There's an old story about a man who spent 2 years preparing to kill a bishop. He shadowed him from city to city, learned his routine, mapped every route. But every time the moment came, he blinked. The bishop coughed. A pigeon landed nearby. A child started to cry. After 2 years, the assassin approached the bishop in public. He didn't strike. He just stared at him, then walked away. The bishop never knew. The man never tried again. Historians still argue whether that story's true or allegory. Some say the assassin later became a monk. Others say he disappeared. One old text simply calls him the man who didn't. You feel like him now. A shadow of intent. A blade without a swing. You slide out of the crawl space covered in dust and resentment. The chapel is quiet. Candles flicker low. You slip past the altar, through the vestry, and out into the night. The cold air hits you hard. Like a reset button, your lungs expand painfully at first. You're back in the world, and you're angry. Angry that your life is narrowed into this hiding, hoping, hesitating. Angry that someone else writes the rules, hands you names, and then forgets you exist. Angry that you never sleep, and when you do, you dream of being chased, not by guards, but by goats, onions, and monks with suspicious cats. You walk fast toward the bridge. Beneath it, the river mutters to itself. You crouch, splash your face, and try not to scream. And then you hear it. A voice. Low, familiar. You turn your head. Across the street in the shadows is Tomas, your employer. He's not alone. He's talking to someone, handing them something. A purse. A map. You duck behind a pillar. Heart pounding. You shouldn't be surprised. Tomas never cared about loyalty. He's probably hiring someone else. Someone faster, braver, cheaper, or someone to replace you or remove you. You watch him leave. He doesn't look back. He never does. You stand there a long time, wet and cold, the sound of the river echoing in your chest. This is why assassins didn't last. It wasn't just the danger. It was the sleeplessness, the not knowing who to trust, the realization that every job could be your last because your employer decided you were too much risk, too little reward. You drag yourself back through the alleys, past the onion woman. She's gone. Her stall empty. A single bulb left behind, like a final offering. You take it. Tonight you won't kill anyone. Tonight you'll sleep, maybe. But tomorrow you'll find Tomas again, because you've decided something. As the moon climbs high and the bells toll the hour, you're tired of being hired. It's time to write your own list. Your body aches, but it's your brain that's tired. You've stopped flinching at every creak. Your instincts are dulled not from carelessness, but from overuse. You're not built for this. No one is. Not night after night. Not in alleyways that smell like vinegar and rot. Not crouched under pews pretending to be invisible while monks debate theology 5 feet away. Tonight you're back in your usual hiding spot behind the butchers. It's warm here at least. Not because of kindness. Because of meat scraps. Dogs love it, you less so. You're not here for a target tonight. You're here to think. Because something's shifting in you. When you first started, you were focused. Nervous, yes, but focused. You believed your work mattered. That your targets deserved it. That your name would vanish, but your actions might echo. Now you're questioning everything. Especially the people who hand you names. Take Tomas, the man who told you who to kill, who promised payment. She doesn't kill. Not yet. You think she's new? You think she's unsure? Like you were? You don't speak to her? But one night you leave a mark in chalk on the wall near her perch, a small triangle. The next night it's copied just to the right. A sign. Recognition. You're not sure what that means yet, but it's something. You hear of another, a former soldier, now acting as muscle for Tomas. But he talks too much, especially after cider. He lets slip names, dates, targets. You follow him for 3 nights, learn his habits, his weakness, gambling. You slip him a coin one night, say nothing. He nods, says less. You're not building a team. Not exactly. But you're mapping the game board. And for once you're not the pawn. Still the insomnia lingers. Assassins in the medieval world lived under constant stress. One source mentions a hired killer who confessed to seeing his victims in dreams, each one silently mouthing his name. He drank wine with wormwood to chase the visions. Some say they were paid off to disappear. Others, not so lucky. You make a decision. You're not going to run. You're not going to wait to be replaced or erased. You're going to make the next move. You start asking around, quietly. First, the tinker who sees everything. Who said you're helping clean up this city? Last night you saw him handing a list to someone else. A woman you didn't recognize. Younger, confident. She had a proper blade. She didn't flinch. He called her my new star. You're not surprised. But it still burns. Assassins were always expendable. The moment you hesitate, miss, or question someone else, takes your place. It's not personal. It's economics. One recorded group in early 14th century Italy kept a rotation of 7 night agents. If one died or disappeared, the next stepped in, like millstones grinding one after another. No questions, no loyalty, just function. Historians still argue whether the practice was organized or just cynical happenstance. But it feels familiar. You're beginning to suspect Tomas has a whole stable of you. Which begs the question, what happens when your usefulness ends? You've heard rumors. Old assassins who vanish. Some say they left for the countryside. It didn't work. He walked into a river one morning and never came out. You've had your share of dreams too. One recurring, you're walking a narrow bridge. Below you, nothing. Above you, a figure in white. You never reach them. You always wake up when you try to speak. A scribe once told you that dreams of bridges mean transition or doom. He couldn't decide. Tonight you sit under a dripping eave, sharpening your dagger, not for a job, for you, because you've realized something no one told you. The hardest part of being a medieval assassin isn't the killing. It's remembering who you are when no one wants you to. There's blood on your tunic. Not yours, not tonight anyway. It's from a man who wasn't supposed to be there. A servant, maybe, or a lookout. You didn't ask. He drew a knife. You reacted. That's the line you keep telling yourself. But it doesn't make the shaking stop. You wash the fabric in the river, scrubbing until your fingers go numb. It doesn't matter. The stain will never come out. Not the red, not the moment. This is the part of the job. No one trains you for the aftermath. Killing someone isn't like in the stories. There's no poetic silence. No echoing gong. Just a lot of noise. And then when it's over, just silence. Empty, uncomfortable silence that stretches into the cold dawn. The historians are quiet about this part. They focus on who died, not what came next. But there are scraps, letters, confessions, rumors. One assassin reportedly quit after a single job. He joined a monastery, spoke only in whispers, and was said to flinch every time a bell rang. Another carved a tally of his kills on a wooden bowl, then smashed it, burned the pieces, and tried to forget what he knew. You're starting to understand why. Tomas didn't even blink when you told him about the servant. He nodded, tossed you 2 extra coins, and said, "Collateral." He knew the risks. You wanted to ask, did you? You didn't say anything. Because you know what happens to people who ask questions. People who get soft. They end up in rivers, or hanging, or forgotten. You stay. But something cracks a little more. And you know eventually you'll have to choose. Not between life and death, but between doing your job and keeping your soul. You thought assassins were mostly men. That's what people assume. That danger wears stubble and scowls. That blades rest easier in big hands. And death always steps heavy. But tonight you meet someone who proves otherwise. Her name isn't her real name. She tells you to call her Vida. Her voice is low, calm, the kind that sounds like it was trained in a library full of locked drawers and dangerous books. You don't know if she's here for the same reason you are, or if fate just placed you in the same alley. Again. You've crossed paths twice before, always silently, always at a distance. This time you speak. You follow Tomas, you ask. She nods. Instead, you walked away. Not fast. Not slow. Just walked. Like a ghost nobody's looking at. That's how most assassins moved in public. Like background noise. People assumed you were just another tradesman. A scribe. A beggar. They never guessed what you carried. What you knew. What you had done. But now it's harder to disappear. You're marked maybe not visibly, but inwardly. Something shifts after the first kill. Your gaze lingers longer. Your hands don't rest. You calculate escape routes, even in conversation. You flinch at kindness, and yet you still go back. Why? Maybe it's the money, maybe it's inertia, maybe it's because quitting means admitting what you've become. Maybe it's because you've seen too much to pretend otherwise. One quirky fact: in 1272, an assassin in Prague faked his own death to retire. Buried a pig in his place, moved 3 towns over, became a brewer. His beer was excellent. Then someone recognized his walk. He was dragged back, tried and hanged. His brewery stayed open. You wonder if you could disappear like that. New name, new trade, new life. But no, Tomas would find you, or someone like him. Because once you're in this world, it follows you. You remember that face from last week, the younger woman, the new hire? She's already changed. She walks with purpose now. Less hesitation. Her clothes are darker, her eyes are harder. You know the signs. You saw them in your own reflection not long ago. You tried to warn her with your eyes. She looked past you. They always do. Tonight your orders are different. You're not meant to kill. You're meant to watch. A noble woman traveling from the east. Tomas says she's a person of interest. That means someone's preparing for something bigger. Assassination is usually the end of a process. Watching is the beginning. So you find a perch in a broken attic, 3 stories up, overlooking the square where her party is due to arrive. You wait. Of course. Always waiting. You sip water from a gourd that tastes faintly of soap. You chew dried apple, then spit it out. It's gone soft in the worst way. You pass the time the way all assassins. Do you imagine lives that aren't yours? You see a merchant and wonder what it's like to care only about cloth and profit. You see a boy chasing a hoop and wonder how long until someone teaches him fear. You see a baker dusted with flour, laughing. You wonder if he knows anyone wants anyone dead. And then she arrives. The noble woman. Regal. Older than you expected. Calm. Surrounded by guards, but not armored. She smiles at people, waves to children. She's kind. No, that can't be right. You're supposed to watch for weaknesses. But all you see is grace. You don't like this. Not because it's confusing, but because it isn't. You realize you don't want her on any list. You don't want to draw her window or time her walk or guess which guard might betray her. You just want to walk away. But you don't. You work for him. A pause. Then, no. I use him. You like that answer more than you should. Medieval records of female assassins are rare, but they exist buried under layers of gossip, forgotten chronicles and footnotes, in trials written by men, too shocked to believe it. A woman with a knife, a woman who plotted, who poisoned, who vanished before dawn. It unsettled the world. One of the most infamous was the pale widow who operated out of Venice in the late 14th century. She posed as a mourner attending funerals of powerful men's wives until she wasn't mourning anymore. The records say she was never caught. Some say she joined a convent. Others say she staged her own funeral. Historians still argue whether she existed or was a combination of several women's stories stitched into legend. Either way, it doesn't feel like fiction when Vita moves. She walks like she's been doing this longer than you. Her knife is smaller than yours, but sharper. Her clothes aren't black, they're brown, the color of shadows and gutters. Her eyes never stop scanning. She tells you she learned from a woman who learned from a nun who once killed a cardinal with a hairpin. You want to laugh, but you don't. Because Vita has already mapped out your next target's routes. She knows where he drinks, where he prays, what his guard eats for breakfast. She offers you the information like it costs her nothing. What's in it for you, you ask? She shrugs. Not dying. Fair. You spend the evening watching a scribe's house together. The scribe has powerful enemies. Apparently, he's been quietly forging documents that shift land ownership. Land means power. Power means risk. Risk means someone wants him gone. You'd be working alone if not for Vita. She never asks why you're doing this, which is a mercy. You're not sure what you'd say anymore. The reasons have worn thin with time. Justice, number money. Not really. Revenge. Maybe. But for what Vita offers no history. She speaks only in the present tense. She says things like, he has a dog. It sleeps at the foot of the bed. Snoring tells us where he is. And the side gate creaks unless you press the middle slat. She's not cold, just clear. You're starting to think clarity is rarer than silence. Together you plan. Not like amateurs, not like fools, like people who want to live. You set the strike for midnight. Not tonight. Tomorrow. You'll wait for the moon to wane, for the watchman to rotate, for the neighbor's rooster, yes, a rooster, to be relocated to a fair 2 towns away. Vita arranged that. You didn't ask how. You ask instead how many she answers without looking at you. 6. You don't ask names. You share a meal. Flatbread, figs, water. It tastes better than anything you've had in weeks. You wonder if this is what companionship feels like in your world. Brief, functional, quiet. She says, don't grow attached. You nod. You both ignore the fact that you're sitting closer than necessary. Quirky note. There's a 15th century manuscript that describes a guild of female agents in Constantinople who operated under the guise of silk traders. They passed coded messages in embroidery. One assassin allegedly hid a sliver of iron in the spine of her sewing needle case. The record ends with, she was never seen again, though the man was buried with a very small wound. Vita might be one of them, if time bent a little. You learn more from watching her in one evening than from weeks of failure on your own. She doesn't talk about victory. She talks about exit points, about how to walk away, about when to walk away. You ask her, have you ever missed? She nods. Once. I didn't try again for 2 years. You don't ask if the person deserved to live. You ask, why did you come back? She turns her head and says, because someone else didn't. You let that silence hang. He's muttering to himself. He doesn't know. You don't draw your blade yet. You wait and wait. Assassins had to. History books may summarize killings with a sentence or two, but behind every line was an hour, maybe a night of frozen stillness, breath, held decisions made in silence. This one is harder than expected. He looks older, worn down. His candle burns low. He dips the quill, writes again, rubs his face. You see no guard, no family, just a man and his work, and you watching. Downstairs a board creaks, Vita. You tense, but there's no sound of discovery. She's checking for surprises like always. She's methodical, careful. Then a whisper. It's her voice. He's not alone. You freeze. She slides back into the stairwell. You crouch behind a cabinet as a second figure enters the room. A boy. Young, 12 maybe, hair unkempt. He hands the scribe a pouch of wax. The scribe smiles, thanks him, ruffles his hair. You curse softly. Tomas said nothing about a child, just that the girl became a nun and spent her life praying for a father she barely remembered. Historians debate whether the assassins had a code, or if they were simply tired of mess. You and Vita are tired too. You find a safe spot near the dye vats, abandoned this time of year. You sit. No torches, just moonlight. She offers you dried meat. You offer her half an onion. You both grimace. It's a start. Then she asks something strange. Have you ever considered leaving? You laugh. Not at her, at the absurdity of the idea. Where would I go, you ask? She shrugs. I heard rumors. There's a place in Sicily. They say they take in people like us. No names, no jobs, just quiet. You stare at her. You believe that? She doesn't answer. Maybe she does. Maybe she needs to. You sleep side by side, backs against cold brick. No dreams, or none that you remember. The next morning you wake to shouting in the square. Someone has killed the scribe. You bolt upright. Vita's already halfway to the edge of the alley watching. The town crier is breathless. Stabbed through the throat, he gasps. In his sleep. No sign of break-in. Guard baffled. You exchange a look. Vita says, "It wasn't me. You know it wasn't you." You look around. It was someone else. Someone faster. Someone Tomas found after you walked away. He did want the job done. He just didn't care who did it. You realize now you weren't hired for your skill. You were tested for your loyalty. You failed. But you're alive. Vita pulls her hood up. We disappear, she says. You nod. Because you both understand the only way out is out. No more names, no more lists, no more Tomas. You turn your back on the square, on the dead man, on the whispers, already forming. And as you vanish into the rising sun, your feet ache, your heart pounds, and your shadow finally starts to feel like your own again. You don't leave the city that night. You wait 2 more days, watching, listening, making sure no one's following you, making sure Tomas isn't still watching you. You're not paranoid. You're just a survivor now. Vita is quieter than usual. She's not angry. She's thinking. She spends her time sketching exit routes in the dirt with a stick, checking maps that don't have names, counting coins like they might multiply under pressure. You're not sure how long she's been planning this escape. Maybe since the beginning. You always assumed you'd die in this city. Now, for the first time in months, you think you might not. The plan is simple because it has to be. You'll take the trade route south through the old Roman roads, past the forest that no longer has wolves, but still makes you shiver. You'll follow a grain convoy for part of the way. Blending in is safer than hiding. You pack lightly. One cloak, one blade, no poison. You leave behind the hammer. It's too heavy with memory. On the third night you visit the onion seller. Her stall is still up. This wasn't part of the plan. You wait. Again. Minutes pass. The boy dozes on the floor, wrapped in a blanket. The scribe returns to his writing. You crawl back to the window. Vida meets you there silent. You exchange a look. She nods once firmly. Not tonight. You retreat. 2 streets away you speak. You didn't know about the boy? She shakes her head. You believe her. Still want to finish the job you ask. Vida shrugs. He's not worth killing if it makes us hesitate. You're surprised. Not because she has a heart, but because she listens to it. Some assassins bury that part deep. Not her. One obscure tale from Avignon tells of 2 assassins' partners sent to kill a papal clerk. When they found him asleep with his infant daughter on his chest, they walked away. Later, they poisoned the man's bath instead. A clean death, the record said, without trauma to the child. No names were recorded. She squints when she sees you just like always. You give her 3 coins. For the goat I never found, you say. She snorts. That goat owes me rent. You both laugh. The sound surprises you. You take 1 onion for the road, and then you walk away from everything. You and Vida travel mostly in silence. Not because you have nothing to say, but because some things are understood, that trust is fragile, that words can trigger ghosts, and that once you've walked beside death long enough, it stops needing an introduction. You sleep in barns, caves, a hollow tree once. Vida snores, lightly. You never tease her. By the 2nd week, you feel something shift. Your spine straightens. Your hands stop twitching. You don't check your shadow every 3rd step. You start to feel human again. There's a strange freedom in walking away from killing. You'd think you'd feel weak or empty, but instead it feels like drying out after a long, cold rain. The kind that seeps into your bones and makes you forget you were ever warm. You pass through towns that have never heard of Tomas. You eat food without tasting fear. You even dream once of nothing. Pure black silence. The most peaceful thing you've known. You tell Vida about it. She nods. Says, the dream with nothing is the best one. She doesn't smile much, but when she does, it's real. In one village, you hear a rumor. They say a man named Tomas was found floating in a well, his hands bound his mouth, stuffed with a scrap of parchment. You ask what was written on it. The farmer shrugs. Just a name. Nobody we knew. You don't ask more. You and Vita keep walking. Historians don't write about the assassins who left. Not really. There are no monuments to people who chose not to kill. No footnotes about what it means to step away. But maybe there should be. Because it takes something sharp to wield a blade, but something stronger to lay it down. One day on the edge of a port city, you see it. The sea. Wide. Endless. Quiet. Vida says we could go farther. You say, let's just sit for now. So you do. Side by side with a breeze in your hair and no dagger on your belt. You eat the last of your bread. You peel the onion. It's sharp. It makes your eyes water. But you're not crying. You're just alive. And for once, that's enough. Because in this life, that's all the explanation anyone ever gets. The moon is thinning just as planned. The rooster has been sold to a butcher's son who thinks it's lucky. The side gate has been oiled. The neighbor's dog has been bribed with 2 smoked herrings. You and Vita move like smoke between alleys, silent practice, knowing this is your best shot. Tonight, the target is inside. Alone. The scribe. His house is small, 2 stories, wood beams, warped by time door, slightly crooked on its hinges. His curtains flutter cheap linen, not silk. Not rich, but valuable. To someone. You and Vita split. She'll watch the back. You'll go in through the window. You both agreed, no noise, no fire, no mess. You breathe slowly. 1, 2, 3. You hoist yourself onto the barrel. Press your fingers against the windowsill. It gives. Inside, the room smells of ink and candle wax like a tired monastery. The scribe is hunched over a desk, scratching words onto parchment. You don't talk much about the past anymore, not because you're hiding it. There's simply less to say with each passing mile. The edges of those memories dull like well-worn boots. The names you used to mutter in the dark. Your targets, your employers, your ghosts don't surface as often. And when they do, you let them float by. You and Vita take work in a coastal town that smells like salt and fish and hope. You load crates, sweep cellars, patch nets. No one asks where you came from. You're just more strangers looking for coin. This time it's honest. Mostly. Because old instincts don't die. They just sit quietly watching. The tavern near the docks is a good place to listen. Fishermen talk too much when they drink. Sailors even more. Some nights you hear stories that remind you of your old life. A man poisoned in his sleep. A noble's wine tampered with. A bar fight that ended with someone missing a tongue. You and Vita exchange a look. That she hates the smell of sheep, that she used to write poems when she was a girl, bad ones. She says all about wind and loss, and someone who never wrote back. You ask her if she'd ever write again. She shrugs. Maybe. You talk to. You tell her about the time you tried to blend into a procession of monks and accidentally joined a funeral march for a noble you nearly assassinated a month earlier. He looked right at me, you say. Didn't recognize me. I was holding a candle. She laughs. Actually laughs, loud and surprised. You realize you've missed the sound of someone laughing without bitterness. You pass through towns where no one knows your face. That still feels strange. You expect questions, suspicion, eyes tracking you. But most people are too busy living their own lives to dissect yours. You help mend a roof in exchange for soup. Vita stitches a woman's torn tunic with practiced hands. You sleep in barns, in fields, under stars. You're becoming someone else, someone who isn't followed by shadow, someone who can sleep. One night you dream again, but this time you're not hiding. You're in a sunlit room. There's a table, bread, 2 mugs. You sit across from someone faceless but not threatening. You feel safe. When you wake, you're sad. Not because it was just a dream, but because it didn't feel like one. You walk quietly that morning. So does Vita. You don't ask why. Some silences don't need to be broken. You cross a stream with water so clear you can see every pebble. It reminds you of a time you cleaned your blade in a river, just like it, only back then you didn't notice the stones. You do now. That night, camped under a pear tree, Vita says, "There's something I never told you." You glance at her. She's staring at the fire. "I had a sister. Younger, bright, loud. She died because I didn't say no to a job." You say nothing. Just wait. She wasn't a target. She was nearby, caught in it. You nod slowly. Grapes that taste like dusk. Wine that doesn't taste like guilt. A room with shutters that never have to be bolted. You ask if she still carries a blade. She does. But she doesn't touch it. "I carry it to remember," she says, "not to use." You nod. You do the same. One afternoon, a child runs through the market and nearly bowls you over. She's barefoot, laughing, hair full of salt. She stops, stares at you, then hands you a wildflower. "Looks like you needed one," she says. You take it. Thank her. You stand there for a long time holding something fragile and harmless in your hand. It's the first gift you've received in years that didn't come with a price. You keep walking after that, not to run, not to hide, but because forward is the only direction you trust now. And somewhere beyond this town, beyond the hills and the sea, there's a vineyard waiting. Or maybe not, maybe that's just the dream. But either way, you'll follow it. And then softly, we found it. You don't ask what it is, you know. You sit on a rock, watch the light change, feel the old weight melt off your shoulders. And for the first time in longer than you can measure, you feel something break open in your chest. Hope. You stay. Not forever. Not yet. But long enough that people start to remember your names. Not your real names, of course. You gave those up years ago, tucked them into the same mental drawer where you keep your first job, your first kill, your first regret. But the names you use now, they feel real enough. Vita becomes the woman with the good stitching. You are the one who lifts the barrels without complaint. People wave, people nod. A few even smile without flinching. The cottage on the bend belongs to a widow named Nella, who has arthritis in her knees and a sour attitude toward roosters. She lets you both stay in the barn, hayloft, dry, surprisingly cozy. She pays in bread and gossip. I thought, if I kept going, kept working, maybe it would mean something. Maybe I'd find the person who ordered it, fix the balance. She looks up. I never did. You say, you stopped anyway. She nods. Because of you. You don't know what to say to that. So you offer the last piece of dried pear from your satchel. She takes it. Sometimes that's enough. Later, as the fire dies, you whisper, I had a brother. She opens one eye. He left. Never knew what I did. I sometimes wonder if I'll see him again. And if I do, who he'll think I am. She says, you'll know who you are. That's the only part that matters. You fall asleep to the sound of wind in the leaves. No dreams that night. Just rest. The next morning you reach the top of a ridge. Below is a valley of gold and green. Vineyards stretch across it like stories waiting to be told. A small cottage sits at the bend of a road, smoke curling from the chimney. Vida doesn't say anything. She just looks. You offer repairs heavy lifting. The kind of quiet help no one asks for, but everyone needs. You find rhythm in repetition. Mornings are for hauling water, tending vines, fixing fences. Evenings bring warmth soup, sometimes music drifting from the nearby mill house. You've never lived slowly before. Turns out it suits you. There are moments now, brief but growing, where you forget. You look down and your hands aren't clenched. Your back doesn't itch from imagined eyes. You walk into a room without planning 3 ways out. Historians never wrote about former assassins who planted herbs and watched the seasons turn. They chronicled violence, not recovery. But there must have been some, men and women, who laid down their blades and chose stillness over blood. Maybe their names are lost because that's what they wanted. You understand that now. One day you and Vida go to the market. You buy apples. She haggles over cheese. And one evening, as the sun sets like melted copper across the vineyard, you turn to her and say, I think I'm ready. She doesn't ask what you mean. Because she is too. The letter is short. Just a few lines. Carefully inked. Folded once. Sealed with wax that isn't yours. It came from Nella's kitchen drawer. The seal, a grape leaf, fitting. You leave it with a traveling monk headed north. No name, no address, just a direction and a description. If he's still alive, you tell the monk he'll understand what it means. The monk nods, takes the small coin you offer, and promises nothing. That's fine. You expected nothing. But it feels right, letting a piece of yourself float back out into the world. You don't tell Vida. She's busy that day building a stone wall around Nella's herb patch. You join her after the monk leaves, slipping into the rhythm of lifting, placing, adjusting. It's good work. Honest. Uncomplicated. And in the life you've lived, truth is rare. Worth more than coin. Worth more than silence. So you both sleep better that night. The wind doesn't wake you. The creaks in the barn don't trigger memories. Your dreams are slow, unremarkable, and blessedly boring. And when you wake, you don't reach for a blade. You stretch. Yawn, smile. Because the weight that once pressed on your ribs with every breath is finally lifting. You might never forget what you did, but for the first time you're remembering who you are. The harvest comes early. Grapes hang fat and low on the vine, their skins dusky with bloom. The village buzzes with a kind of work that feels ancient and celebratory, pressing, sorting, stomping in barrels with bare feet and bad songs. You're part of it now, laughing with juice on your fingers, your sleeves rolled up like everyone else. You and Vita work side by side. No more whispered meetings in alleyways. You never say it, but you both think the same thing. Someone else is still out there, still playing the game. One night, a traveler mentions a name you recognize. Not a target, a colleague, one of Tomas's stars. The traveler says she was found near the border, face down, no weapon, no purse, just a mark carved into her hand. A triangle. You feel your stomach drop. Vita says nothing, but her fingers tighten around her mug. You never told anyone about that triangle. You think back when you first left it behind, chalked it on the wall, hoping someone would understand. Maybe she did. Maybe she found Tomas after all. You wonder if she hesitated, if she asked questions, if she wanted out. You never find out. You never go looking, because the farther you walk from that life, the less it grips you. Not because you forget, but because you learn to carry it without letting it steer. There's a wind down that happens after killing, a tapering off. Just you at rest in a world that's moved forward and allowed you to step with it. Maybe you still feel echoes of who you were, what you carried. That's okay. That shadow will always walk beside you. But it no longer leads. Now it follows. And as you drift deeper, feel the weight of that story soften. Let it fall behind, like dust shaken loose from old clothes. Let it settle. Because the person you were walked through the fire. And now the person you are walks through gardens with bare feet, with breath, with purpose. You earned this sleep, not through the silence of death, but through the stillness of peace. So breathe a little deeper now. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders fall. Let the story close behind your eyes. And if you dream, let it be quiet. Let it be soft. Let it be yours. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams. You pass a traveling juggler performing for a handful of kids. One throws a rock at him. He flinches, drops his pins. You catch them, just out of reflex. The juggler thanks you. The kids cheer. For a moment, you're the hero of a story you didn't ask to be part of. You hand the pins back, step away. Vita smirks. Still quick, she says, still watching you reply. That night, lying under a soft blanket in the loft, you ask, do you think we'll ever tell someone everything? She's quiet a long time. Then, no. You nod. Do you want to? You think, no. Some stories are too heavy to hand to anyone else. They bend the hands that hold them. But not all stories are meant to be told. Some are meant to be lived. You grow things now. Not just vegetables, though. Nella insists you learn to prune tomatoes without murdering them. You grow patience, stillness, trust. By nightfall, your hands ache, your shoulders burn, and your mind is finally quiet. That's becoming more common. You and Vita begin to talk about staying, not just lingering, but settling, building something. Maybe not forever, but long enough to forget what forever used to mean. Vita wants a dog. You want a proper table. Nella laughs when she hears that. You two. Settling down, she snorts, kneading dough with her elbows. Next, you'll be joining the village council. You and Vita share a glance. That night you take a walk. No purpose, no scouting, just walking. The stars are high. The air is cool and full of crickets. The fields smell of thyme and recent rain. I think I might plant something, you say. Vita raises an eyebrow. Besides onions. You smirk. Maybe beans. She thinks about it. Too hopeful. Try cabbage. Cabbage never expects anything. You both laugh. The idea of planting something and watching it grow feels radical. Reckless even. No watching over shoulders waiting for knives to speak first. Just labor, honest and exhausting. Children run barefoot through the vineyards throwing pebbles and stealing grapes. One of them trips near your boots. You catch her before she falls. She grins up at you, gap-toothed and fearless. She asks, "Are you a soldier?" You pause, surprised. "No," you say gently, "not anymore." She nods, like that makes perfect sense, then darts off without another word. Vida hears, she says nothing. But later that night, when the sky is clear and the fire is low, she brings you a cup of warm cider and says softly, "That was a good answer." You nod. You think so too. There are still scars, of course. The ones that show, the ones that don't. Some nights you wake at the sound of wind and think it's footsteps. Other nights you sleep straight through thunder. Healing, it turns out, isn't loud. It's slow, messy, uneven. But it comes. You begin keeping a journal. Nothing fancy. Assassins don't make gardens. But you're not one anymore. At least not today. You pass a stone by the path. A flat one. Familiar, you stop. Turn it over. There's a mark scratched on the underside. Faint. A triangle. You go still. Vida notices your silence. She steps beside you, sees the mark. You both stare at it. The wind shifts. You bury the stone in the dirt. No words, just the action. Vida doesn't ask what it means. She knows. You both walk on. There's a strange peace in knowing the past will never fully vanish, but that it doesn't have to define the direction of your feet. The next morning you help repair a roof. Vida butchers a chicken. You sit with Nella at sunset and talk about the wine harvest. Life goes on. And later that night, you say the thing neither of you has said aloud yet. I don't want to run anymore. Vida looks at you for a long moment. Then me neither. It's not a declaration, not a promise, just a truth, just pages filled with your new life. Lists of things planted, people met, small victories, a day with no fear, a morning where the birdsong drowned out the memory of a scream. Vida reads a few pages one afternoon. She smiles, says, "You've got a voice." You say, "So do you." You both understand the truth in that. Because your lives once written in silence and blood are now being rewritten, line by quiet line. One crisp evening, a merchant caravan passes through. Among the travelers is a young man carrying a pack of letters. He reads them aloud in the square for coin. You sit at the edge of the crowd sipping something warm. One letter makes you freeze. It's yours. The one you sent with the monk. The man reading it looks confused by its vagueness. No names. Just a memory of a river, a sunset, and a goat that always ran. He finishes, shrugs, moves on. You don't step forward. You don't need to, because you've finally remembered something no employer ever wanted you to know. You were never meant to serve death. You were meant to outlive it. The road curves inland. It's dustier here, warmer. The sea is a whisper behind you now, and ahead lie hills like sleeping animals, soft-backed, grass-covered, gentle from a distance, but tiring on your legs. The locals call them old hills, not because of their age, everything out here is old, but because they feel tired. You understand that? You and Vita walk without urgency now. No one's chasing you. You're no longer chasing anyone. Time is finally your own. It's strange. You'd think freedom would be a loud thing, a fanfare, a rush. But it arrives quietly like dew. You notice it in the small things, no longer listening for footsteps at night, no longer tracing escape routes through buildings, no longer assuming every kindness hides a knife. Vida speaks more on these walks. Little things. How she once liked olives. Once a merchant passes through and tries to hire you both for a quiet job, he's vague but not vague enough. You and Vita say nothing. Just look at him. He leaves without finishing his drink. He doesn't come back. It's a small thing, but afterward you both sit longer in the sun that day, like the world just passed another test. You find you miss the road less and less. Miss the risk even less than that. There's one day you mark without saying it aloud, the anniversary of your last job. You spend it fixing a gate. Vida makes stew. Nothing fancy. No ceremony. But something in you settles. The nightmares taper off. The ones that come don't linger. You start to write things down. Not names, not deeds. Just thoughts, bits of memory. Dreams you had but never shared. Hopes you didn't know how to name. Vida sees once. Doesn't read. Just says, good. You keep writing. A slow return to breath, to sleep, to hunger for something besides survival. You learn strange things about yourself in this new life. You like the way fresh fish feels in your hands. Slick, yes, but real. You like the sound of gulls, annoying as they are. You like the ache in your arms after a day stacking crates. It's a different kind of tired than the assassin's tired. This one is earned. You dream again. Sometimes you're back in the alleys, but they're empty now. The windows are open, no one screams, no one hides. Just wind and leaves. Sometimes you follow it, sometimes you stop. Once in a dream you find your old dagger lying on a table. You pick it up. It's light. Hollow, you set it down again. Historians rarely wrote about what happened after. They focused on the blade, not the hand that dropped it. But you know now the real story wasn't the assassination. It was the long quiet after. Vida starts smiling more. She talks about Sicily again. A vineyard maybe, because you sent it out not for a reply, but to let the past know you were still here. Now it knows, and now you are free. Vida joins you at the edge of the field the next morning. You're planting onions. She watches amused. Of course. Something familiar, you say, digging the small trench, but new. She kneels, begins helping. You work in silence for a while. Dirt under your nails, sun on your backs, wind on your faces, and then softly she says, "We made it." You look up, you look at her, and you nod, because it's true. You made it. Not to safety, not to peace, but to a place where safety and peace are possible. And for two people who once lived in shadow, that is everything. So now here you are, lying still, listening to breath slow, to your thoughts gently untangle. The night is quiet, and you are too. No more footsteps in the dark. No more names whispered like debts. No more cold fingers on old blades.